The autumn rain drummed against the tall windows of Ravenscroft Palace as Princess Elena stood in the shadows of the grand hall, watching servants drape black silk over golden frames. 3 days had passed since King Edward the Wise had drawn his final breath, and already the ancient wheels of tradition were turning with unstoppable force. Elena pressed her fingers against the cold glass, her breath fogging the window as she gazed out at the kingdom of Astoria. Beyond the palace gates, thousands of people had gathered, their faces etched with grief and uncertainty. Candles flickered in the growing darkness, creating a sea of gentle light that stretched as far as the eye could see. These were her people now, though the weight of that responsibility felt heavier than any crown. "Your Majesty," came a soft voice behind her. Elena turned to see Lord Chancellor Pemberton approaching, his usually pristine appearance somewhat disheveled after days of endless arrangements. The elderly man had served her father for 30 years, and the loss showed clearly in his weary eyes. "Please, Lord Chancellor," Elena said quietly. "I am not yet crowned. Princess will suffice for now." Pemberton's weathered face creased into something resembling a smile. "With respect, Your Majesty, you became queen the moment your father passed. The crown ceremony is merely a formality." Elena nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. At 28, she had prepared for this moment her entire life. Yet nothing could have truly readied her for the crushing reality of sudden loss and immediate responsibility. Her father had been ill, yes, but his death had come sooner than anyone expected. The palace buzzed with activity as preparations for both the funeral and coronation proceeded simultaneously. In the distance, Elena could hear the measured footsteps of the royal guard practicing their ceremonial march, while kitchen staff worked around the clock to prepare for the hundreds of foreign dignitaries expected to arrive. "Your Majesty," Pemberton continued, "we must discuss the matter of the crown jewels. The ceremony requires that you wear the starfire diamond, as is tradition for all new monarchs." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The starfire diamond, a legendary gem said to have been blessed by ancient kings and queens, possessing an almost mystical significance in Astorian history. Legend claimed that only a true ruler could wear it without consequence, and that it would shine brightest when worn by one destined for greatness. "I understand," she replied, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. "When shall I see it?" "Tomorrow morning, Your Majesty. The royal jeweler will present it to you privately, as is customary." However, Pemberton paused, his expression growing serious. "There is something you should know. Your cousin Prince Marcus has formally contested your claim to the throne." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus, her father's nephew, had always harbored ambitions for the crown. As a male relative, some of the more traditional nobles might support his claim, despite Elena being the rightful heir according to modern succession laws. "On what grounds?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "He claims that as the kingdom faces uncertain times, it requires a king's strength rather than a queen's guidance." Pemberton's distaste for the argument was evident in his tone. "He has gained support from several traditionalist houses, though the majority of Parliament stands firmly behind you." Elena walked to her father's throne, now draped in black velvet. She had sat beside it countless times during state functions, but had never imagined how daunting it would look when it became hers to occupy. The ornate chair seemed to loom over her, its intricate carvings depicting centuries of Astorian rulers who had faced their own challenges and emerged victorious. "What does the law say?" she asked. "The law is clear. You are the rightful heir. However, Marcus is calling for a traditional trial by acceptance. He wants to present himself before the people during your coronation and request their judgment." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of generations pressing down upon her shoulders. A trial by acceptance hadn't been invoked in over 2 centuries, but it remained legal under ancient Astorian law. It would mean that both she and Marcus would present themselves to the gathered nobles and citizens, and their approval would determine the rightful ruler. "If I refuse?" "You cannot, Your Majesty. To refuse would be to acknowledge doubt in your own legitimacy. The people would see it as weakness." The princess, now queen, walked slowly around the throne room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Portraits of her ancestors watched from their gilded frames, their painted eyes seeming to follow her movement. Each had faced their own trials, their own moments of doubt and decision. "Then we shall proceed with the trial," Elena said finally, surprised by the strength in her own voice. But first I want to visit my father." Pemberton bowed respectfully. "Of course, Your Majesty." Elena made her way through the palace corridors, past tapestries that told the story of Astoria's glorious history. Guards bowed as she passed, their expressions mixing respect with sympathy. She reached the royal chapel, where King Edward lay in state surrounded by beautiful flowers from across the kingdom. Approaching the casket, Elena knelt beside her father's peaceful form. He looked younger somehow, the worry lines that had deepened during his final years now smoothed away. She reached out to touch his cold hand, remembering how those same hands had taught her to sign official documents, had guided her through her first public speeches, had comforted her through childhood fears. "I don't know if I'm strong enough, Papa," she whispered. "You made it look so easy, but I feel like I'm drowning in expectations and traditions I don't fully understand." The silence of the chapel was broken only by the gentle flickering of hundreds of candles. Elena remained there for nearly an hour, drawing strength from her father's presence and trying to imagine what advice he might give her in this moment of crisis. As she finally rose to leave, a young page appeared at the chapel entrance. "Your Majesty," the boy said nervously, "Lord Chancellor Pemberton requests your presence. Prince Marcus has arrived at the palace and wishes to speak with you." Elena straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. The real test was about to begin, and she would face it with the dignity her father had taught her. Tomorrow would bring the Starfire diamond and all its legendary power, but tonight she had to confront the family member who threatened everything she had been born to inherit. Prince Marcus stood in the blue drawing room with an air of confidence that immediately set Elena's nerves on edge. Her cousin had always been handsome in a classical way, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of commanding presence that seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. At 35, he possessed the bearing of someone who had never questioned his own importance. "Cousin," he said with a slight bow that somehow managed to convey both respect and condescension. "My deepest condolences on Uncle Edward's passing. He was a great man." "Thank you, Marcus," Elena replied, maintaining her composure despite the tension crackling between them. "Though I must say your timing is rather interesting. Most family members wait until after the funeral to contest succession claims." Marcus had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but his resolve didn't waver. "I felt it was important to address this matter quickly, for the good of the kingdom. Astoria faces challenging times ahead, economic uncertainty, border tensions with neighboring countries, and a restless population demanding strong leadership. And you believe I cannot provide that leadership because I'm a woman?" "I believe," Marcus said carefully, "that the people need to see strength and continuity. The nobles, the military leaders, the common folk, they all look to tradition for comfort during times of change. A king has ruled Astoria for over 300 years. Elena walked to the window, looking out at the mourning citizens still gathered in the courtyard. "Those same people have watched me grow up. They've seen me at state functions, charity events, and public appearances since I was a child. I am not unknown to them." "But you are untested," Marcus pressed. "I have served as a military commander, led diplomatic missions, and governed provinces. When the nobles look at me, they see experience. When they look at you, they see ambition," Elena countered, turning back to face him. "Tell me, cousin, what exactly do you hope to accomplish with this trial by acceptance? Surely you realize that Parliament supports my claim?" Marcus moved closer, his expression growing more serious. "Parliament may support you now, but public opinion can shift quickly. The trial will force both of us to present our vision for Astoria's future. Let the people decide who they trust to guide them through the difficult years ahead." Elena studied her cousin's face, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found none, which troubled her more than his words. Marcus truly believed he would be a better ruler, and that conviction would make him a formidable opponent. "Very well," she said finally. "The trial shall proceed as you request. But understand this. I will not simply step aside to make your path easier. I am my father's daughter, and I will fight for what is rightfully mine." A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps respect, crossed Marcus's features. "I would expect nothing less from Uncle Edward's heir. May the best ruler win." After Marcus departed, Elena found herself alone with her thoughts and fears. She summoned Lady Margaret, her closest friend and most trusted advisor, to join her in the privacy of her chambers. "How bad is it?" Elena asked without preamble. Lady Margaret, A sharp-witted woman of 40 with an uncanny ability to read political currents, settled into a chair across from the young queen. Worse than we initially thought. Marcus has been building support for months, perhaps even years. He's cultivated relationships with key military leaders and several influential houses. Which houses? The Ashfords, definitely. Lord Ashford has never been comfortable with female succession. The Blackwoods are wavering. They have significant mining interests and want assurance about economic policies. The Sterlings have made no official statement, but Lady Sterling was seen dining with Marcus just last week. Elena rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. And our supporters? Strong but not overwhelming. The younger nobles generally support you, as do most of the merchants and professional classes. The military is split. The older generals favor Marcus while the younger officers seem to prefer you. The common people? Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully. They loved your father, and they're inclined to support his chosen heir. But they're also frightened and looking for someone who can provide stability. What about tomorrow's ceremony with the Starfire Diamond? Margaret's expression grew thoughtful. That could change everything. You know the legends as well as I do. The diamond is said to recognize true leadership. If it shines brightly when you wear it, as it did for your father and grandfather, it could sway many of the undecided nobles. And if it doesn't shine? Then we have a much bigger problem than Marcus's challenge. Elena rose and moved to her balcony doors, stepping out into the cool night air. The crowds below had grown larger, with people arriving from distant provinces to pay their respects to the late king. Torches and lanterns created a warm glow that pushed back the autumn darkness. "Maggie," she said, using her friend's childhood nickname, "do you really think I can do this? Not just win the trial, but actually be a good queen?" Margaret joined her on the balcony, placing a comforting hand on Elena's shoulder. "I've watched you your entire life. I've seen you comfort grieving families, negotiate with stubborn politicians, and stand firm in your principles, even when it would be easier to compromise. Your father chose you as his heir, not because you were his only child, but because he recognized in you the qualities that make a great ruler. But Marcus is right about one thing. I am inexperienced in many ways. I've never led troops into battle or negotiated a major trade agreement. Neither had your father when he became king at 24. Neither had most rulers throughout history. Experience is valuable, but it's not everything. Wisdom, compassion, and the ability to inspire others. These matter more than a military resume." Elena leaned against the balcony railing, watching a group of children place flowers at the palace gates. Their innocence and hope struck her deeply. These were the people she would serve, the future she would help shape. "Tomorrow, when I see the Starfire Diamond for the first time, what should I expect?" Margaret smiled mysteriously. "I was present when your father first wore it 40 years ago." The entire room seemed to hold its breath as the jeweler placed it in his hands. Then, as if responding to some inner light, the diamond began to glow with an intensity that took everyone's breath away. The assembled nobles fell to their knees spontaneously. And if the same thing happens for me, then Marcus's challenge becomes meaningless. The diamond doesn't lie, Elena. It has recognized every legitimate ruler in Astoria's history. If it accepts you, no one will dare question your right to rule. Elena nodded, though anxiety still churned in her stomach. Everything would depend on tomorrow's ceremony. Not just her ability to wear the legendary gem, but how she presented herself to the gathered nobles and citizens who would witness the moment. "I should rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow will be a long day." As Margaret prepared to leave, she turned back with one final thought. "Elena, remember that your strength has never come from trying to be like the kings who came before you. It comes from being exactly who you are, a woman who understands both power and mercy, tradition and progress. Don't try to become someone else for the crown. Let the crown become worthy of you." Alone in her chambers, Elena prepared for what might be her last night as a princess. Tomorrow would bring the Starfire Diamond, the trial by acceptance, and the beginning of either her reign or her exile. She fell asleep clutching her father's ring, praying for the wisdom to prove herself worthy of the trust he had placed in her. Dawn broke gray and misty over Ravenscroft Palace, matching Elena's somber mood as she prepared for the most important day of her life. She had barely slept, her dreams filled with visions of glowing diamonds and disapproving faces, Now, as her ladies-in-waiting helped her into a simple morning dress, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon her shoulders. "Your Majesty," announced Sir Geoffrey the royal jeweler as he entered the Queen's private study, carrying an ornate wooden box. The elderly craftsman had served the royal family for over 30 years, his hands steady despite his advanced age. Behind him walked 2 armed guards, their presence a reminder of the priceless treasure they protected. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as Sir Geoffrey placed the box on her father's antique desk. The morning light streaming through tall windows seemed to focus on that single spot, as if even nature recognized the significance of what was about to unfold. "Before I open this, Your Majesty," Sir Geoffrey said solemnly, "I must remind you of the legend surrounding the Starfire diamond. It has been worn by 23 monarchs of Astoria, and each time it has revealed the truth of their character." "What exactly does that mean?" Elena asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "The diamond responds to the wearer's inner nature. For those destined to rule with wisdom and justice, it shines with brilliant light. For those driven by greed or darkness..." He paused meaningfully. "Well, there have been pretenders throughout history who found the diamond cold and lifeless in their hands." Elena nodded, though privately she wondered if these were merely old stories designed to intimidate challengers to the throne. Still, as Sir Geoffrey's weathered fingers worked the ancient lock, she found herself holding her breath. The box opened with a soft click, revealing the most beautiful gemstone Elena had ever seen. The Starfire diamond sat nestled in midnight blue velvet, roughly the size of a robin's egg and cut with incredible precision. Even in the pale morning light, it seemed to pulse with inner fire, casting rainbow reflections across the study walls. "It's magnificent," Elena whispered, reaching toward it before stopping herself. "May I touch it?" "Of course, Your Majesty. But I should warn you, the diamond's reaction is immediate. There will be no mistaking its judgment." Elena extended her hand slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as they approached the legendary gem. The moment her skin made contact with the faceted surface, warmth spread up her arm like liquid light. The diamond's glow intensified dramatically, filling the entire room with brilliant radiance that seemed to come from within the stone itself. Sir Geoffrey gasped and fell to one knee. "Your Majesty," he breathed, "I have never seen it shine so brightly. Not even for your father or grandfather." Elena lifted the diamond, marveling at how perfectly it fit in her palm. The warmth continued to pulse through her, bringing with it an unexpected sense of calm and certainty. For the first time since her father's death, she felt truly ready to accept her destiny. "When do we proceed to the Great Hall?" she asked. "Within the hour, Your Majesty. The ceremony must take place before noon, as tradition demands. All the noble houses have already assembled, including Prince Marcus and his supporters." Elena nodded, carefully placing the diamond back in its box. The glow faded gradually, but she could still feel its warmth in her memory. Whatever happened during the trial by acceptance, she now knew the ancient gem had chosen her. Lady Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement. "Elena, you must see this. Word of the diamond's reaction has somehow spread throughout the palace. The servants are saying it lit up the entire wing of the building." "How could word travel so quickly?" "Palace servants see everything and hear more," Margaret replied with a knowing smile. "But this works in our favor. By the time we reach the Great Hall, everyone will know that the Starfire diamond has accepted you." Elena allowed her ladies-in-waiting to dress her in the formal coronation robes, deep purple velvet trimmed with ermine, with the golden sash of Astoria across her chest. The weight of the fabric reminded her of the responsibility she was about to shoulder, but the memory of the diamond's warmth gave her strength. As they prepared to leave for the Great Hall, a commotion in the courtyard caught their attention. Looking out the window, Elena saw a surprising sight. Hundreds of common citizens had gathered outside the palace gates, many carrying banners with her name and image. "They're here to support you," Margaret observed. "News of Prince Marcus's challenge has reached the people, and they're making their feelings known." Elena watched as more people arrived, some traveling from distant villages and towns. Merchants, farmers, craftsmen, and laborers, all coming to witness this historic moment. Their presence filled her with both pride and anxiety. These were the people whose lives would be affected by whoever emerged victorious from today's trial. "Your Majesty," Sir Geoffrey interrupted her thoughts, "it is time." The procession to the great hall felt like a march toward destiny. Elena walked slowly, flanked by guards and followed by her most trusted advisors. The diamond box, now carried by Sir Geoffrey, seemed to emit a faint glow even through its closed lid. The great hall had been transformed for the occasion. Ancient banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, representing every noble house in the kingdom. Hundreds of people filled the space, nobles in their finest garments, foreign ambassadors, military leaders, and representatives from every major city and town. At the far end of the hall, 2 thrones had been placed on the raised dais, her father's throne, now draped in mourning black, and beside it, a smaller chair that would serve as hers once the ceremony concluded successfully. Prince Marcus stood with his supporters on the left side of the hall, his expression confident but watchful. He wore military dress uniform, the medals on his chest catching the light from hundreds of candles. Several powerful nobles flanked him, including Lord Ashford and other traditionalist leaders. On the right side, Elena's supporters had gathered. She was relieved to see so many familiar faces. Young nobles who believed in progress, military officers who had served under her father, and representatives from the merchant guilds who valued stability and fair governance. Lord Chancellor Pemberton stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed hall. Lords and ladies, distinguished guests, we gather today to witness a trial by acceptance as prescribed by ancient Asturian law. Princess Elena, rightful heir of King Edward the Wise, and Prince Marcus, her cousin and challenger, will each present themselves for the people's judgment. A murmur ran through the crowd as the formal proceedings began. Elena felt every eye in the room upon her, assessing her worthiness, her strength, her right to rule. The weight of their expectations was almost overwhelming. Furthermore, Pemberton continued, according to tradition, each claimant must be tested by the Starfire Diamond, that the people might witness heaven's judgment upon their character. Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding but her head held high. This was the moment that would determine not just her own fate, but the future of the entire kingdom. As Sir Geoffrey approached with the precious box, she caught sight of her father's portrait hanging above the throne, his painted eyes seeming to offer encouragement across the gulf of death. The trial was about to begin, and with it, the true test of everything she had been raised to become. The diamond had accepted her in private, but now it would declare its judgment before the eyes of the world. Elena squared her shoulders and prepared to claim her birthright. The great hall fell into complete silence as Lord Chancellor Pemberton raised the ancient ceremonial staff, its golden head catching the light from hundreds of candles. The weight of 1,000 years of tradition seemed to press down upon everyone present as the trial by acceptance officially began. By the laws of Astoria and the customs of our forefathers, Pemberton's voice rang out. We call upon Prince Marcus to present himself first, as the challenger to the throne. Marcus stepped forward with military precision, his polished boots clicking against the marble floor. Every gesture spoke of confidence and command as he took his position before the assembled crowd. Elena watched from the side, noting how naturally he commanded attention, how the older nobles leaned forward with interest. Lords and ladies of Astoria, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the vast hall. I stand before you not out of personal ambition, but out of love for our kingdom and concern for its future. These are dangerous times. Our neighbors grow stronger while we face internal divisions. Trade routes are threatened and our people look to their leaders for strength and certainty. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. I have served this kingdom for 15 years as a military commander. I have led our forces to victory against raiders from the northern territories. I have negotiated treaties that protected our borders and secured favorable trade agreements. When crisis calls, experience answers. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus was even more persuasive than she had expected, and she could see some of the undecided nobles nodding in agreement. His military achievements were real and impressive, giving weight to his words. Princess Elena is undoubtedly intelligent and well-meaning, Marcus continued. But good intentions cannot substitute for proven leadership. The crown requires someone who has been tested in the fires of conflict, someone who understands the harsh realities of governance. I offer myself not as a usurper, but as a proven guardian of Astorian interests. When Marcus finished, a considerable portion of the hall erupted in applause. The military officers were particularly enthusiastic. and Elena noticed several nobles who had previously been neutral, now looking thoughtful about Marcus's argument. Lord Pemberton called for silence before announcing, "Prince Marcus will now be tested by the Starfire diamond." Sir Geoffrey approached Marcus with the opened box, and Elena held her breath. She knew the diamond had accepted her that morning, but watching her cousin reach for the legendary gem still filled her with anxiety. What if she had imagined its reaction? What if the diamond accepted Marcus as well? Marcus lifted the Starfire diamond with steady hands, holding it up for all to see. For a moment, nothing happened. The gem remained beautiful but ordinary, reflecting the candlelight without any special radiance. Then, slowly, a pale glow began to emanate from its depths. Not the brilliant fire Elena had experienced, but a steady, respectable light that drew murmurs of approval from his supporters. "The diamond acknowledges Prince Marcus," Pemberton announced, though his tone suggested some surprise at the muted response. "It shines, though not with the intensity of legend." Elena's heart sank slightly. She had hoped the diamond would reject Marcus entirely, making her own claim indisputable. Instead, it seemed to offer a qualified acceptance, enough to validate his challenge, but not enough to overwhelm her supporters. Marcus returned the diamond to Sir Geoffrey with a satisfied smile, clearly pleased with the result. He had passed the test, and his confidence was evident as he took his place among his supporters. "Princess Elena," Pemberton called, "you may now present yourself before the assembly." Elena walked forward, feeling the weight of every gaze in the hall. Unlike Marcus's military bearing, she moved with quiet grace, her royal training evident in every step. When she reached the center of the hall, she took a moment to look around at the faces watching her, some hopeful, some skeptical, all waiting to hear what she would say. "My lords and ladies," she began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "My cousin speaks of strength and experience, and these are valuable qualities in a ruler. But I would ask you to consider what kind of strength our kingdom truly needs in the years ahead." She moved slightly, addressing different sections of the crowd as she spoke. "True strength is not found only on the battlefield. It lies in the ability to unite rather than divide, to listen before acting, to understand that a kingdom's greatest resource is not its armies or its gold, but its people." Elena could see she had captured their attention, and she pressed her advantage. "Prince Marcus has indeed served our military with distinction, but I have served our people in different ways. I have walked among them during times of plague and famine. I have held the hands of mothers who lost their children. And I have worked to ensure that our laws protect the weak as well as the strong." The common people in the galleries above began to stir with approval, and Elena felt a surge of connection with them. These were her people, and they understood her message. Experience is valuable, but wisdom does not come only with age. Sometimes it comes from seeing the world with fresh eyes, from understanding that the old ways are not always the best ways. "I offer you not just the continuation of my father's legacy, but the promise of progress guided by compassion." As she spoke about education reforms, economic development that would benefit all classes, and diplomatic solutions to regional conflicts, Elena could see the mood in the hall shifting. The younger nobles were clearly with her, but more importantly, some of the moderates were beginning to look convinced. "Astoria has always been strongest when it embraced both tradition and innovation," she concluded. "I ask for your trust not because I am perfect, but because I am committed to serving every citizen of this kingdom with equal dedication." The applause that followed was thunderous, with the galleries of common people cheering enthusiastically. Even some of Marcus's supporters seemed impressed by her speech, though they maintained their loyalty to their chosen candidate. Now came the moment Elena had been both anticipating and dreading. Sir Geoffrey approached with the Starfire diamond, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. This was the test that would determine everything. Elena reached for the diamond with steady hands, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The moment her fingers closed around the ancient gem, the hall erupted in gasps of amazement. The diamond blazed with brilliant light, far brighter than it had shone for Marcus, far brighter than anyone had ever seen it shine before. The radiance was so intense that many people had to shield their eyes. The light seemed to pour out of the diamond in waves, illuminating every corner of the great hall and casting rainbow reflections off the golden fixtures. It was as if the very essence of divine approval was flowing through the ancient gem. Sir Geoffrey fell to his knees immediately, followed by Lord Pemberton and most of the assembled nobles. Even some of Marcus's supporters found themselves kneeling before the obvious display of celestial favor. The common people in the galleries began to cheer, their voices echoing through the vast space. Elena stood in the center of it all, holding the blazing diamond aloft, feeling its warmth flow through her entire being. She was no longer just a princess hoping to inherit her father's throne. She was a queen, chosen by forces beyond human understanding. Marcus stood frozen among his supporters, his face pale with shock and something that might have been fear. The difference between the diamond's reaction to him and its overwhelming acceptance of Elena was impossible to deny or explain away. As the light gradually faded and the diamond returned to its normal brilliance, Elena lowered it carefully. The message had been delivered, and everyone in the hall understood its meaning. The trial by acceptance was effectively over, though the formal procedures still needed to be completed. Lord Pemberton rose shakily to his feet, his voice filled with awe as he addressed the assembly. The Starfire diamond has spoken with unprecedented clarity. Never in recorded history has it shone with such brilliance. The heavens themselves have declared their choice. Elena looked out at the sea of faces before her, seeing acceptance, wonder, and in many cases, genuine joy. Even among Marcus's supporters, resistance was crumbling in the face of such an obvious divine mandate. The trial was won, but Elena knew this was only the beginning of her challenges as queen. Still, as she held the legendary diamond and felt its continuing warmth, she was filled with confidence that she could meet whatever difficulties lay ahead. The moments following the diamond's brilliant display felt suspended in time, as if the entire kingdom held its breath waiting to see what would happen next. Elena stood at the center of the great hall, still feeling the warmth of the Starfire diamond's acceptance flowing through her, while hundreds of eyes watched for her next move. Prince Marcus remained motionless among his supporters, his face a careful mask that revealed nothing of the turmoil that must have been raging within him. Elena could see the internal struggle playing out in his eyes, the shock of the diamond's overwhelming rejection of his claim, the realization that his carefully laid plans had crumbled in a matter of seconds, and perhaps most difficult of all, the knowledge that he had been publicly shown to be the lesser choice. Lord Chancellor Pemberton cleared his throat, breaking the spell that seemed to have fallen over the assembly. By ancient law and divine sign, the trial by acceptance has reached its conclusion. Princess Elena stands proven as the rightful heir to the throne of Astoria. Instead of the expected celebration, Elena raised her hand for silence. She had learned from her father that moments of victory required as much wisdom as moments of crisis. How she handled this triumph would set the tone for her entire reign. "My lords and ladies," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed hall, "the diamond has spoken and I am humbled by its acceptance. But I want everyone here to understand that this victory belongs not to me alone, but to all of Astoria. We are one kingdom, one people, and we will move forward together." She turned to look directly at Marcus, and many in the hall followed her gaze. "Cousin, you challenged my claim out of love for this kingdom, and I respect that motivation even though I disagree with your methods. You have served Astoria with honor and distinction, and I hope you will continue to do so under my reign." Marcus stepped forward slowly, his expression unreadable. For a tense moment, Elena wondered if he would refuse to accept the trial's outcome, potentially splitting the kingdom into civil conflict. Then, to her relief and the obvious surprise of many observers, he knelt on one knee before her. "Your Majesty," he said formally, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "I acknowledge the diamond's judgment and your rightful claim to the throne. I pledge my loyalty to you and to the kingdom we both serve." The gesture sent ripples of approval through the assembled nobles. By submitting gracefully to the trial's outcome, Marcus had preserved his honor while also demonstrating his commitment to Astoria's stability. Elena felt a surge of gratitude toward her cousin, recognizing the courage it took to publicly admit defeat. "Rise, cousin," she said warmly, "and take your place among my advisors. Astoria needs your experience and your dedication, now more than ever." As Marcus stood and moved to join her supporters, Elena could see the political landscape of her kingdom shifting before her eyes. Several nobles who had backed Marcus now approached to offer their allegiance, understanding that the new queen was offering them a chance to be part of her administration rather than outcasts from it. Lord Pemberton stepped forward once again, this time carrying the crown of Astoria on a velvet cushion. The ancient circlet of gold and precious stones had adorned the heads of 23 monarchs before Elena, and now it would become hers. "Your Majesty," he said solemnly, "will you accept the crown and all the responsibilities it represents?" "I will," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. As Pemberton placed the crown upon her head, the weight of it seemed to settle not just on her brow but on her entire being. She was no longer Princess Elena, heir to the throne. She was Queen Elena, sovereign ruler of Astoria, responsible for the welfare and protection of millions of people. The hall erupted in cheers and applause with cries of "Long live the Queen," echoing from every corner. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of support and celebration that seemed to lift Elena's spirits even as it reminded her of the enormous expectations now resting on her shoulders. Sir Geoffrey approached once more, this time carrying a different box. Inside lay the royal scepter and the seal of state, the final symbols of her authority. As Elena accepted these ancient artifacts, she felt the complete transformation taking place. Every gesture, every symbol, every ritual was binding her more closely to her role as Astoria's leader. "Your first duty as queen," Pemberton murmured quietly as the celebration continued around them, "is to address your people from the palace balcony. They have been waiting all morning to hear from their new sovereign." Elena nodded, suddenly remembering the thousands of citizens gathered outside the palace gates. These formal ceremonies were important, but her real relationship would be with the common people who worked the fields, ran the shops, and lived their lives far from the grandeur of the palace. The procession from the great hall to the main balcony felt like a triumphal march. Elena walked slowly, acknowledging the bows and curtsies of the nobles lining her path, but her mind was already focused on the speech she would need to give to her people. When she stepped onto the balcony overlooking the main courtyard, the roar of approval from the crowd below was deafening. Thousands of people had gathered, spilling out beyond the palace gates and into the surrounding streets. They waved flags, threw flower petals into the air, and called out congratulations to their new queen. Elena raised her hand for silence, and gradually the crowd quieted, though the excitement remained palpable in the crisp autumn air. "My dear people of Astoria," she began, projecting her voice so it would carry to the furthest edges of the crowd, "today marks not just the beginning of my reign, but the start of a new chapter in our kingdom's great story." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces below, young and old, rich and poor, all united in this moment of celebration and hope. "I know that many of you have concerns about what lies ahead. Change can be frightening, especially when we are still mourning the loss of my beloved father. But I want you to know that I see your struggles. I understand your hopes, and I am committed to serving every one of you with the same dedication that King Edward showed throughout his reign." The crowd listened intently as Elena outlined her vision for Astoria's future. Improvements to education that would give children from all backgrounds better opportunities, economic policies designed to create prosperity for merchants and farmers alike, and diplomatic initiatives aimed at maintaining peace while protecting the kingdom's interests. "I may be young," she concluded, "but I carry with me the wisdom of all who came before me, the strength of all who support me, and the dreams of all who will come after us. Together we will build an Astoria that our children and grandchildren will be proud to inherit." The response was thunderous, with cheers and applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. Elena remained on the balcony for several more minutes, waving to her people and basking in their approval. As she finally turned to go back inside, Lady Margaret appeared at her side with a knowing smile. "How does it feel to be queen?" Elena considered the question carefully as they walked back through the palace corridors. "Terrifying and wonderful at the same time," she admitted. "The diamond's acceptance gives me confidence, but I know the real test lies ahead. Ruling a kingdom is about much more than ceremonial moments and inspiring speeches." "True," Margaret agreed, "but today showed everyone that you belong on that throne. Even Marcus's supporters are coming around. Lord Ashford was just telling Lord Pemberton that he's impressed by your grace and victory." Elena smiled at that news. Winning over the traditionalist nobles would be crucial to maintaining stability and unity in her kingdom. As evening approached and the celebrations continued throughout the capital, Elena retreated to her private chambers for a few moments of quiet reflection. She held the Starfire diamond once more, still marveling at its warmth and the certainty it had given her. Tomorrow would bring the real work of ruling. Meetings with advisors, decisions about policies, the endless details of governing a complex kingdom. But tonight she allowed herself to savor this moment of triumph and the knowledge that she had proven herself worthy of her father's trust. The girl who had watched nervously from palace windows just days ago was gone, replaced by a queen ready to lead her people into an uncertain but hopeful future. 3 weeks into her reign, Queen Elena discovered that wearing the crown was far easier than carrying its weight. She sat in the council chamber at dawn, surrounded by stacks of documents that required her immediate attention. Trade disputes with neighboring kingdoms, reports of crop failures in the eastern provinces, and urgent requests for military reinforcement along the northern border. "Your Majesty," Lord Chancellor Pemberton said as he entered with yet another pile of papers, "the ambassador from Valdoria has requested an immediate audience. There seems to be some urgency regarding the mining rights agreement." Helena rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. The glamour of Coronation Day had quickly given way to the grinding reality of governance. Every decision she made seemed to create 2 new problems, and she was beginning to understand why her father had always looked so tired during his final years. "Schedule the ambassador for this afternoon," she replied. "But first I need to address the situation in Millbrook. The reports of the grain shortage are getting worse." Lady Margaret entered the chamber, carrying correspondence from various provincial governors. "The situation is indeed serious, Elena. Lord Hartwell estimates that without immediate intervention, the eastern provinces could face real famine before winter ends." Elena studied the reports carefully, noting the dry statistics that represented thousands of families facing hunger. This was exactly the kind of crisis that would test her resolve and her ability to act decisively. "What are our options?" she asked. Prince Marcus, who had proved invaluable as her military advisor despite their past conflict, spread a map across the large table. "We have surplus grain stored in the western provinces, but transporting it across the kingdom will be expensive and time-consuming. The mountain passes are already becoming difficult due to early snows. What about purchasing grain from our neighbors?" Elena suggested. "Valdoria has surplus, but they're demanding favorable mining concessions in exchange," Pemberton explained. "Essentially, they want access to our silver mines for 20 years at reduced rates." Elena stood and walked to the large window overlooking the capital. Below, she could see merchants setting up their stalls in the morning market, their lives continuing in peaceful normalcy, while she grappled with decisions that could affect the entire kingdom. The mining concessions would solve the immediate crisis, she mused, but they would also cost us significantly in the long term. "What's our current treasury situation? Adequate for normal expenses, but a large grain purchase would strain our resources considerably," Pemberton admitted. "Your father was always conservative with finances, which served us well, but it limits our options in emergencies." Elena turned back to her advisors, her mind working through the complex calculations of costs and benefits. "Send word to Lord Hartwell that we will provide assistance, but I want to explore all our options before committing to any single course of action." Over the following hours, Elena threw herself into understanding every aspect of the crisis. She summoned the kingdom's top agricultural experts, reviewed detailed reports on transportation capabilities, and even met with representatives from the affected provinces who had traveled to the capital seeking help. It was during one of these meetings that Elena had an insight that would define her approach to governance. A farmer named Thomas from Millbrook was explaining the local situation when he mentioned something that caught her attention. "Your Majesty, it's not just the grain shortage that's hurting us. The mills themselves are old and inefficient. We lose nearly a third of our crop to poor processing and storage." Elena leaned forward, interested. "What would it take to improve these facilities?" "Well, Your Majesty, there are new designs for grain mills that could increase efficiency dramatically, but the initial investment would be substantial." An idea began to form in Elena's mind. Instead of simply treating the immediate crisis, what if she could address the underlying problems that made such shortages possible? She called an emergency council meeting that evening, presenting her plan to the assembled advisors. "Rather than accepting Valdoria's mining concessions or depleting our treasury for a temporary solution, I propose we make a long-term investment in our agricultural infrastructure." Marcus looked skeptical. "Your Majesty, the people need grain now, not promises of future improvements." "I understand that," Elena replied, "but hear me out. We use a portion of our treasury to purchase enough grain to prevent immediate famine, but we also invest in modernizing the mills and storage facilities in the affected regions. This will prevent future shortages and make our kingdom more self-sufficient." Lady Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "It's ambitious, but it addresses the root cause rather than just the symptoms." "Where would the additional funding come from?" Pemberton asked pragmatically. Elena had anticipated this question. "I've been reviewing the royal household expenses. We can reduce spending on court ceremonies and luxury items. Additionally, I propose creating a new tax on luxury imports that will primarily affect the wealthy, rather than common citizens." The room fell silent as her advisors considered the proposal. Elena knew she was taking a risk, suggesting that the royal family reduce its own lifestyle while asking the nobility to pay higher taxes was politically dangerous. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "this approach could work, but it will create enemies among the merchant houses and some nobles who profit from luxury trade." "Perhaps," Elena acknowledged, "but it will also demonstrate that the crown is willing to share the burden of national challenges. My father taught me that true leadership sometimes requires sacrifice." Over the next few days, Elena worked tirelessly to build support for her plan. She met privately with key nobles, explaining how agricultural improvements would benefit everyone through increased stability and trade opportunities. She also made sure that representatives from the affected provinces understood that help was coming, even if it took a slightly different form than expected. The breakthrough came when Lord Stirling, one of the most influential moderates in the nobility, publicly endorsed her approach. "The young queen shows wisdom beyond her years," he announced during a formal court session. "This plan demonstrates both compassion for immediate suffering and strategic thinking for long-term prosperity." With Stirling's support, other nobles began to fall in line. Even some of Marcus's former supporters acknowledged that Elena's approach showed the kind of innovative thinking Astoria needed. The implementation phase proved challenging but ultimately successful. Elena personally traveled to the affected provinces, something that shocked many observers who expected her to govern from the comfort of the palace. She inspected the old mills, spoke directly with farmers about their needs, and supervised the distribution of emergency grain supplies. The sight of their young queen working alongside common laborers to organize relief efforts had a profound impact on the people. Word spread throughout the kingdom of Elena's hands-on approach to governance, and her popularity soared. "You realize," Lady Margaret observed during one of these visits, "that you're establishing a new model for how Astorian monarchs relate to their people." Elena paused in her review of construction plans for a new grain storage facility. "Is that necessarily a bad thing?" "Not at all. But it does set expectations for future rulers. Your successors will be compared to the queen who got her hands dirty to help her people." Elena smiled at that thought. Then perhaps they'll be better rulers for it. As autumn turned to winter, the results of Elena's approach became clear. The immediate crisis had been averted without costly foreign concessions or treasury depletion. More importantly, the new agricultural infrastructure was already showing promise for improved future harvests. But Elena's most significant achievement was less tangible. She had established herself as a queen who combined traditional royal dignity with genuine concern for her people's welfare. The nobles respected her intelligence and innovation, while the common people felt a personal connection to their monarch that hadn't existed for generations. One evening, as Elena reviewed reports from the various projects underway throughout the kingdom, she reflected on how much had changed since her coronation. The Starfire diamond sat in its special case nearby, no longer glowing with supernatural light but still radiating the quiet confidence it had given her. She thought about her father and wondered if he would be proud of the choices she had made. The kingdom he had left her was stable but cautious, prosperous but somewhat stagnant. Under her guidance, it was becoming something more dynamic and responsive to its people's needs. There would be new challenges ahead. There always were for any ruler. But Elena felt ready to face them with the same combination of careful planning and bold action that had resolved the grain crisis. She was no longer the uncertain princess who had worried about her ability to rule. She was Queen Elena of Astoria, and she was beginning to understand the true power and responsibility that came with the crown. 5 years had passed since the Starfire diamond blazed with unprecedented brilliance in the Great Hall, and the kingdom of Astoria had transformed in ways that few could have imagined. Queen Elena stood once again on the palace balcony, but this time she was not addressing a crowd of uncertain subjects. She was welcoming foreign dignitaries to the annual Festival of Prosperity, a celebration that had become the envy of neighboring kingdoms. The capital city spread below her looked dramatically different from the somber place she had inherited. New roads connected bustling markets where merchants from across the continent came to trade. The innovative grain mills she had championed had sparked a renaissance in agriculture that rippled through every aspect of the economy. Schools and libraries dotted the landscape, part of her education initiative that had made Astoria a center of learning and innovation. "Your Majesty," Lady Margaret said, approaching with a smile that had become more frequent over the years. "The delegation from Valdoria has arrived. They're quite eager to discuss the trade partnership proposal." Elena chuckled softly. How times change. 5 years ago, they were demanding mining concessions from a desperate kingdom. Now they're seeking partnership with a prosperous one. The irony was not lost on either woman. Valdoria, which had tried to exploit Astoria's grain crisis, now found itself seeking access to the advanced agricultural techniques and educational resources that Elena's investments had created. Prince Marcus appeared in the doorway, his relationship with the Queen having evolved into one of mutual respect and genuine collaboration. "Elena, the northern border situation has been resolved. The governors report that the new diplomatic protocols you established have prevented another potential conflict." Elena nodded with satisfaction. Her approach to foreign relations, emphasizing economic cooperation over military posturing, had proven remarkably effective. Rather than maintaining expensive armies along every border, she had created trade incentives that made conflict unprofitable for neighboring kingdoms. "Any word from the university delegation?" she asked. "They're arriving this afternoon," Marcus replied. 3 kingdoms are sending representatives to study our educational model. The scholars are particularly interested in the technical schools you established in the rural provinces. Elena had always believed that a kingdom's greatest strength lay in the knowledge and skills of its people. The technical schools that trained farmers in new agricultural methods, taught craftsmen innovative techniques, and educated young people regardless of their family's wealth had become one of her proudest achievements. As the day progressed, Elena moved through the festival celebrations, speaking with visitors from across the continent. Many came seeking to understand how Astoria had achieved such rapid prosperity and stability. The transformation had not gone unnoticed by historians and political philosophers, who were beginning to study her reign as a model for effective governance. "Your Majesty," said Ambassador Richter from the neighboring kingdom of Thornwick, "our king is curious about your decision-making process. How do you balance the needs of different groups within your kingdom?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I learned early in my reign that effective leadership requires listening more than speaking. Before making any major decision, I consult not just with nobles and advisors, but with the people who will be most affected by the policy." This approach had indeed become Elena's signature style. Unlike previous monarchs who governed primarily through court politics, she had established regular forums where citizens could present their concerns directly to the crown. The practice had initially scandalized traditional nobles, but had proven invaluable in preventing problems before they became crises. As evening approached, Elena retreated to her private study for a few moments of quiet reflection. The room had changed significantly since her father's time, where he had kept military maps and diplomatic correspondence. She had installed bookshelves filled with works on agriculture, education, and economic theory. The Starfire diamond sat in its place of honor, no longer a symbol of divine approval but a reminder of the moment when she had found the courage to claim her destiny. Lady Margaret joined her, as she often did during these evening reflections. "The festival has been quite successful. I overheard several foreign ministers discussing how they might implement similar policies in their own kingdoms." "That's exactly what I hoped would happen," Elena replied. "Astoria's prosperity means nothing if it exists in isolation. When our neighbors succeed, we all benefit." Margaret picked up a letter from the stack on Elena's desk. "Speaking of neighbors, you've received a personal message from Queen Isabella of Meridia. She's requesting a private meeting to discuss what she calls the challenges of being a young female ruler in a traditional world." Elena smiled. Her success had indeed inspired other women to claim leadership roles, and she had become an informal mentor to several young queens and princesses across the continent. The network of relationships she had built was proving valuable for both diplomatic and personal reasons. "Schedule the meeting for next month," Elena said. "Isabella is dealing with some of the same resistance I faced early in my reign." As night fell over the capital, Elena made her way to the royal chapel where her father's tomb lay. It had become her custom to visit him at the end of particularly significant days, sharing her thoughts and seeking the wisdom he had tried to impart during his lifetime. "Papa," she said softly, kneeling beside the marble sarcophagus, "I think you would be proud of what we've accomplished. The kingdom is stronger than when you left it, but more importantly, it's kinder." The chapel was quiet except for the gentle flickering of eternal flames that honored past monarchs. Elena thought about the frightened young woman who had stood in this same spot 5 years ago, overwhelmed by responsibility and uncertain of her abilities. "The diamond was right about you, wasn't it?" she continued. "You knew I would find my way even when I doubted myself." A soft footstep behind her announced another presence in the chapel. Elena turned to see Sir Geoffrey, the royal jeweler, approaching with careful steps befitting his advanced age. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "forgive the intrusion, but I wanted to speak with you about the Starfire diamond." Elena rose, curious about what had brought the elderly craftsman to seek her out at such an unusual hour. "What about it, Sir Geoffrey?" "I have served the royal family for 40 years, he began, his voice filled with wonder even after all this time. "I have seen the diamond accept 12 different monarchs, but never have I witnessed anything like what occurred during your trial. The light that emerged that day, it changed something fundamental about the stone itself." Elena looked toward her study where the diamond rested. "Changed it how?" "It has never dimmed since that day, Your Majesty." "Not completely. There is always a faint glow within it now, as if your touch awakens something that cannot be extinguished. The court astronomers believe it reflects the vitality of your reign, that as long as Astoria prospers under your rule, the diamond will continue to shine." Elena felt a chill of wonder run down her spine. The idea that her connection to the ancient gem had created some kind of lasting bond seemed impossible. Yet Sir Geoffrey was not given to flights of fancy. "What does that mean for future rulers?" she asked. "That remains to be seen, Your Majesty. But I believe future generations will look back on your reign as the moment when Astoria truly came into its own as a kingdom. The diamond's eternal glow will serve as a reminder of what enlightened leadership can accomplish." As Sir Geoffrey departed, Elena remained in the chapel for a while longer, contemplating his words. She had always understood that her reign would be judged by history, but the idea that it might have mystical significance was both humbling and intimidating. When she finally returned to her chambers, Elena stood before her window looking out at the city she had helped transform. Lights twinkled in countless homes where families lived with greater security and opportunity than their ancestors had ever known. In the distance, she could see the construction sites where new projects continued to expand the kingdom's infrastructure. The girl who had once watched nervously from palace windows, uncertain of her place in the world, had become a woman who had reshaped that world through courage, compassion, and innovative thinking. The Starfire diamond's moment of brilliant acceptance had been just the beginning. The true test of her worthiness had been written in the years of devoted service that followed. As Elena prepared for sleep, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve her people and strengthen her kingdom. But tonight she could rest knowing that she had proven herself worthy not just of a crown, but of the trust and love of an entire nation. The Starfire diamond continued its eternal glow in the next room, a testament to the transformative power of true leadership and the enduring legacy of a queen who had dared to rule with both wisdom and heart.